poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
What is happening, my friend? Hello and welcome back to Chasing Poker Greatness. I'm your host, Brad Wilson, and today I'm going to be talking with cash game expert and YouTube vlogger Matt Vaughan. At only 28 years old, Matt has been around poker for more than 10 years. He started off like many players at the microstakes online, and as he moved up stakes, he realized he could support himself playing poker and quit his ultra exciting 9-to-5 job at a medical software company. Not long after that, he created his vlog on YouTube, and close to 15,000 subscribers later, the rest is history. Starting off with an offbeat video about a cat, his channel has grown into a wealth of poker information, mostly through his in-depth hand analysis. While Matt isn't 100% a professional poker player, in his own words, he plays poker about as much as anybody possibly can without it being their full-time career. He has had tons of success in both the live and online poker arenas in both cash and tournament formats. Like yours truly, he spends considerably more of his time in cash games, but has still managed to rack up more than $215,000 in winnings over the last few years. He also creates strategic content and does coaching through the poker training site School of Cards, and can be found on a semi-regular schedule streaming his play on Twitch. During our conversation, Matt will share some awesome insights on vlogging and YouTube that will prove extremely valuable if you have any interest in following that path. He also reveals his thoughts on the emotional and mental ups and downs that come with playing poker, the key points he uses to build poker strategy, and of course the events that have had the greatest impact on his journey as he chases poker greatness. So without any further ado, I present to you Matt Vaughan on Chasing Poker Greatness. Matt, how are you doing, my man? Good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Just paid a little more on my car repairs than I'd like, but otherwise, life is good.
How much did we drop in car repairs? Let's get into the meat,
the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
yeah, the meat of this podcast, right?
Right. The high value conversation.
Yeah, just a hair over a G. They tell me I saved $100 though. So
congratulations. That's some rake back.
Feels like I won $100, right? That's what it feels like right now.
Yeah, congrats, man. So I made a mistake in one of my earlier podcast interviews with Matt Staples. I interviewed him, we talked the whole time, and then I realized only at the very end that dude is like 4 years old. No, actually, he's actually like 23 or 24. So let's start this out by asking you, how old are you?
Okay, I'm 28, turned 28 in September. I frequently forget my age, so I think it was just lucky that somebody recently asked me how old I was, because I got to stumble over it with them. And then with you, I was just like, boom, 28,
Dude, you just nailed it.
Nailed it, yeah.
This is running good in life. These are the things that I spend my luck and run good on. So you're not a toddler. So, okay. Yeah, I think we've cleared that. How'd you get into playing cards in the first place? What does your story look like?
So I've been, in and around poker on and off for a really long time. I, took it up in high school or maybe even middle school just with friends, and, super casually. I, at the time, was probably easily the best of my friends just by sheer discipline alone and knowing to play tight. But there wasn't a lot of, spark of the intellectual side of the game or anything like that. Kind of moved away from it, and then I was sort of playing online on and off underage, for literally free rolls, running up $0 to $100 and then back down to $0, probably 5 or 10 times, something like that. And then in college, I, for whatever reason, sort of picked it back up seriously, bought 3 or 4 books, and then
What was the
found
reason?
all of I honestly don't even know how I like came back to it. I know I'd already had like a couple of poker books that I'd gotten as like just random birthday presents here and there because I was interested in it at the time, and I must have just like seen one when I was getting ready to like pack up for college or what have you. And so freshman year, I pretty much like dove into online pretty seriously at the microstakes and was consuming basically all the free content that I could possibly find. Graduated into like training sites and stuff like that, and was really at that point I was much more in love with the actual game itself, not just like being up the guys who had no idea what they were doing. And yeah, I've basically been obsessed with the game ever since. I wasn't really I've never really been like a full-time professional player, but I transitioned from like college. I was taking it very seriously. I had one job outside of college where I was still taking it as a very serious hobby, and then I left that job to basically work part-time for a training site and also play more seriously. So
What training site?
it's called School of Cards. And yeah, so I've been doing that now for pretty much 3 years. My responsibilities with the training site have actually increased over that time. So that's much closer to being a full-time job now than it was when I started. But still obviously playing a lot and taking it pretty much as seriously as one can without being an actual full-time professional player.
Do you derive most of your income from cards in some capacity?
Yeah, so as far as like my how I live, I would say a huge chunk of it comes from the actual playing of the game. Huge chunk comes from working for the training site, and then a significantly smaller chunk comes from the content creation side of things. But those are the three main things that I do for money.
And that's sort of the content creation is like the top of the funnel, right? It's the thing that gets people interested in you, and then you move them down to other things. Nobody's getting rich off of YouTube, I think. Well, okay,
Well,
some
very,
people
very few.
are, but very few people. There's that 8-year-old kid that unboxes toys that's like making, I don't know, 7 billion a year or something.
I think it's safe to say that nobody in poker is getting rich from just YouTube. We can say that.
Well, I mean, even like a Doug Polk, right? He's got hundreds of thousands of people that follow him and consume his content and all of these things. But the revenue comes from Upswing, driving people to Upswing, the training side, and then selling the courses on top of that. So even though YouTube doesn't generate tons of income, it still provides opportunity. Whenever you can build an audience in any fashion, there's opportunity there, right?
Yeah, for sure.
One of your videos, so I'm watching it, I'm doing my research, and like there's a 2-minute montage. Like the whole intro is on your shoes, and you have a conversation about your shoes. And all I'm thinking, without any context, is like, what's the deal with this? Number one, and like number two, how horrible were your old shoes that this needs its own segment?
So this isn't gonna like. There's not going to be a video component to this, right? For the actual final product.
I don't know. There might be some bonus footage depending on if you're
so
cool with it.
I might try to find them for you later. But so yeah. So first of all, I mean, step one is I think I was really bad at editing back then. So I just had like way too many like 2-minute montages of things that could have been like between 5 and 10 seconds long. But I will also say that it was kind of like a meme on my channel for a really long time. And people coming on in the last like 5 or 6 months probably wouldn't like be familiar with it because I've retired those shoes. But like it was a thing, man. Like from the beginning of the channel, people were like, "Yeah, I love the videos, but Matt, you really need new shoes." Because I just had these like old ratty Adidas. Like I'm the guy who will like run my shoes into the ground literally. So it's like, they were still functional. There was no holes in the soles. Like they were fine, right? But of course, like they're ratty. They're not white anymore. It's a mess. And so, I guess I had enough shots of me walking, like just either pointed at the ground or me walking by somewhere. So yeah, people were really obsessed with those shoes. And so when I finally got a new pair, had to commemorate it with a 2-minute montage. Apparently,
It required its own introduction. And yeah, guys, we got the new shoes. So we're cool now. Speaking of your video editing skills, you have around 15,000 YouTube subscribers right now. How did you go about building that audience, being a self-professed recreational player?
Sure. I mean, from the beginning, I didn't really have like a grand plan for what the channel would be or even like how to grow an audience. Like it was definitely very much a trial and error kind of thing for me. In the beginning, I just sort of wanted to make something, and so I did. And then I saw some ways that I could make it better, and so I did. And then it was only like a little bit later that I started to dive a little bit deeper into like content creation, social media, actually like building an audience and kind of getting more interested in that side of things as far as trying to maximize what you can do with YouTube given the time that I had to put into it. So, stuff like optimizing thumbnails and titles and this other stuff like that I never had any of that in the beginning. Like there's literally like, I think my third or fourth video ever is literally a photo of a cat on a poker table, but like you can't tell that it's a poker table at all.
Yeah.
And so there's like no context and like the title doesn't make sense with the thumbnail. And like if I'm looking for poker videos, I'm just like literally never clicking on it. So, huge shout out to anyone who watched that video. I think it was called like One Cool Poker Cat or something like that. It was like really dumb. So shout out to anybody who made it to that video and stuck around.
What are some of the things that you've done to get to the 15K, to grow on a regular basis? Like there's obviously this point of cat video that's obscure and doesn't make a lot of sense in a poker context and nobody can ever find. And then to creating content that's viewed by thousands of people pretty much instantly. Like I want to get into that process, that creative and the growth, because the fact of the matter is, and we spoke about this a little bit before in the pre-interview, is that poker players specifically, multiple streams of income are a good thing. They're just very necessary for the downswings, for all the bad things that will inevitably crush your soul while you play this game. And I think vloggers and YouTube in general has just become this big platform. There's obviously an appetite for it, an audience that wants to see these types of things. So like for the folks out there that are thinking, I could do that. I have a cat. How do they, what do they need to do? What are some of the highest impact things they can do?
Yeah. Shout out to Brad Owen's cat. So, I mean, I think that ultimately you have to start with wanting to make something in the first place, because otherwise you're just going to burn out too fast. There's just too many components that are so much like work that if you don't enjoy the core aspect of creation.
What are the components? What are the components?
So, I mean, like having an idea for something and a vision for what it could be as far as like the visual, if you're in the video medium, like what it could be, and then actually taking the execution steps to get it there. And whether that's literally you sitting in front of a computer editing, or whether it's you organizing and hiring freelancers to edit and all this other stuff, like you have to find some sort of joy in that process, whatever your process ends up looking like. It doesn't have to look the same for everybody. For me, when I first started out, it was, okay, I know that I'm like about to uproot my whole life and kind of like move and change how I'm deriving a lot of my income. And a lot of that's going to be poker. So I want to display that in some sort of a way that's like personal to me, but also focuses on the strategy of the game, because that's something that I love.
Where did you move from? What is
I was living in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. This was right at the end of 2016. And I kind of knew like a few months out that I was going to be leaving and moving, even though I hadn't done it physically yet. So I thought basically that was a good time to sort of kick it off and see where that led. But basically when I first started, it was just sort of like show my life and the poker, whatever that means. And I didn't really have any idea how to edit videos, but I actually really enjoyed editing the videos, which was like it's kind of lucky for me, because if I hated it, I just would have stopped. But when I found that I liked editing it, I also figured out the things that I thought I could do better. And a lot of that was diving into sort of the rabbit hole of how to make better YouTube videos, which for me, I just like enjoy learning a new skill. And so I really loved like diving into other people's YouTube videos about making YouTube videos, which is sort of meta, but it was very fun to just sort of like improve at a skill. So it was like, yeah, poker's always the backbone, but there was this whole other skill set behind it as far as like the content creation side that I really enjoyed working on too.
What software do you use to edit your videos?
So I actually have an iMac for my work stuff. And so I use Final Cut Pro primarily. And that's just like what I've known. I actually started with iMovie though, which is actually not bad for a totally free piece of software, but graduated from that to Final Cut maybe like, I don't know, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I used iMovie 2 on my Mac, and the problem was that it took like 45 minutes to load everything on my Mac. My Mac was not powerful enough to run the software that it came with,
Right.
which is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. I use Adobe Premiere Pro now, but me and you are very different in the loving of the editing of the videos. For me, it's mind-numbingly tedious. And the interesting thing about it too, for me, is in a poker sense, I'm a lot of times the only person qualified to edit the video, because only I know what to look for. I can't find a freelancer. I have to find like the perfect freelancer that knows things about poker in order to edit it like in the way that I want. So if anybody out there is like a Matt Vaughan that loves editing, hit me up, send me an email. There's a spot for you.
Yeah, we've actually found out with School of Cards too, because you can't just hire someone off the street who's like a very solid editor, because they just don't really know what they're looking for half the time. But we're kind of lucky. We have we have one or two guys who have just been around the company so long, they have a better sense of things, even though they're not poker players. And then we have like 3 or 4 of us who are poker players primarily, but can also, hold our own on the editing floor too.
Exactly. And for those of you too that are looking for extra streams of income playing cards, learn how to edit videos and reach out to people. Like this is pretty clear, right? There's a need for it, and very limited folks can do it. But anyway, I'm digressing now. So you love editing. You go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, learning how to make better YouTube videos. What was the most important thing that you learned? Like what has expedited your growth more than all the other things? Like, let's Pareto principle the shit out of this, find the 20% that leads to the 80%.
Yeah. So I was actually going to get back to this, but I think just consistency. You can't rest on YouTube. You really have to be publishing frequently and ideally on some sort of a schedule. I'm terrible at this, but it's like I learned it the hard way, basically. The YouTube algorithm that determines how your videos get placed in front of new eyes, like not just your subscribers, but other people as suggested content, is super important. So everything that you can learn about it is going to help you. But the number one thing is just frequency of upload and consistency of upload. So like for me, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff there too, like different video lengths and so on and so forth. Like how long you have somebody viewing your video and how likely they are to continue watching something on YouTube, whether that's your content or someone else's content, are the 2 driving factors for YouTube wanting to like promote your content to other people. So I went through stints where I'd be like, all right, 2 videos this week, because I was playing and I was pumped up and I had time to edit. And then of course, like I'd go on the inevitable like 2 or 3 week, like, I'm just kind of sick of this. I don't have the time. I just want to like watch Netflix, whatever. And I mean, I was lazy as hell back then, but
how long ago is this?
Well, 3 years, like when I started the videos.
Yeah, way back then, 3 years ago.
Back when I was a toddler. Yeah. So it was like, I would see very significant growth in those periods where I had like 2 or 3 weeks of more than weekly content. And then drop off, like when I had a 2 or 3 week period with no video, and it's like very significant. And you can obviously kind of fake it for a little while, just like do a lot of videos for a period of time to grow. But then, it's hard. Like if you're not consistent, then people sort of fall off. Like they come to expect what they come to expect. And so there's a component of it that's the algorithm, but there's also a component of it that's like human psychology, where people expect the type of content that you've done in the past. And so you kind of have to do something that's manageable, but ideally like never ever go below 1 video a week. And I've been the terrible example of this. So, do what I say, not as I do, if you're getting on YouTube. But
so the most high impact thing they can do is a thing that you don't do.
Right. But it's a thing that I've done. And I had probably like a 18-month period where I never missed a week. And I had a lot of weeks where I was doing more than 1 video. And I experimented with this directly. Like I had a 1-week period where I put out 1 video every single day. And I think that they were probably some of my worst videos I've ever done. Like just completely honestly, they were not high value. I mean, like there was value in them, but for the amount of time that you had to sit there watching it, there wasn't enough value in there to justify the video. And that was my biggest period of growth ever. Like in that month, I think I almost tripled in size from like 700 subscribers to like 2,100 or something like that. It was ridiculous. And of course that was unsustainable. So I just went back to, 1 video a week and back to a normal growth rate for me. But it goes to show that like, if you have the drive to have that consistency, it's really powerful because you get put in front of so many more eyes.
There's a couple of interesting components here for me. Number one, the subjectivity, right? Like you're saying that it's some of the worst content that you put out there. However, you experienced the most growth you've ever experienced. So to me, there's got to be some sort of disconnect, right? Number one, the content probably isn't as bad as you think it is. And you probably think it's worse because you didn't spend the time that you normally do on it, right? So like, I think there's this opinion of self. There's also this story that I love. It's about clay pots and these 2 groups of people that like they make clay pots. One person spends all week making one. The other person spends all week making as many as they possibly can. And the people who spent the whole week making as many as they possibly could ended up outperforming the one by a not insignificant stretch, right? Because their process got better. They got better at it. They got quicker. They learned from their mistakes. I think a lot of times when people are thinking about pulling the trigger, they just want to make sure everything's perfect.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, the first piece of content that you create is almost always going to be shit. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Like, sorry to burst everybody's bubble here, but it's most likely not going to be very good. You get better through repetition, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I would say that your videos probably weren't as bad as you think they were. So let's give yourself some credit. And number 2, like you said, it's probably not sustainable. You're probably going to burn way out, especially if you have trouble putting out 1 a week. Doing like 7 straight, or how would you say a month? 30 straight?
So, I mean, it was a combination of factors. So for one thing, I didn't miss a week that month. Like every week that month was at least 1 video a week. Most were 2, I think.
Yeah.
And then like that 1 week I had 7 videos in a row daily.
Yeah.
As far as like, I mean, I definitely think that my standards have increased dramatically since then. Obviously it's like, 2 years ago or something that I put that content out. And I agree with you. It's not like they weren't valuable at all. But I think the fact of the matter is that YouTube is going to push the content based on the frequency enough that I'm going to be put in front of so many more people that even if the content's not as good, I'm going to retain some percentage of people. So like, for example, if I usually convert, 10% of viewers into subscribers, like if I just 10x the number of people that watch those videos over that time, then even if I dip to 5% or whatever, it's going to still be beneficial
for sure
for that period of time.
Yeah, for sure. So changing gears a little bit, what's the most unexpected thing that's come from you doing your poker vlog?
Definitely the positive engagement from people in the community. Um, I, I mean, like rationally, I always knew that there's going to be comments and interaction through social media and stuff like that, but I never really expected to meet people face to face who had seen my content and been in one way or another positively impacted by it. Like they either just enjoy it for entertainment value, or they got something out of it strategically, or it just re-sparked their interest in the game. And I never, I mean, you talk with like Andrew Nemi, it seems like he had more of a vision for his content. And I like just never really had that from the beginning. So I never really had this concept in mind that these like poker videos that were like sort of half about my life and half about the game could actually foster that in people. So I think that was the most unexpected and probably one of the most rewarding parts of the content creation as well.
Any particular memories come to mind about these meetups, people seeing you in real life, and being like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I know you."
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple good ones. Like I think the funniest one was I actually got recognized at my local grocery store by someone who's watched the vlog. And that's like, it sounds so mundane and like so silly, but to me that was just like mind-boggling, because the only places I'd ever been like recognized before were inside of a poker room pretty much, or like right outside of a poker room. So getting recognized in my grocery store, that was just kind of funny. I wouldn't say that was rewarding so much as just like very surprising.
What did you feel like? What did you feel when somebody's like point you out in the grocery store?
Well, so I was like literally just out of the checkout line and like walking out the door, and you know when you like hear someone maybe say your name and you like kind of attune to it, like you know that it's like you're gonna listen to that more. And I think I hear somebody say my name, but like I'm at the grocery store, like nobody, like, and I work at home. It's not like I'm gonna run into a lot of people I know at the grocery store. So I like don't really turn around, right? And then I hear it again, and so I turn around, and it's just this guy who's watching my videos, and it's saying hi. So like the first emotion is just like complete shock and surprise, like what is happening right now? Um, and then just like there's a little bit of that social awkwardness of like I've never been in this situation before. What is the
Uh-huh.
protocol?
Yeah.
But then it was it was cool. Like we just kind of shook hands. He said, I really enjoy watching your stuff, and that was that. Like it wasn't really a really big thing, but I think it was so memorable because like it was just that unexpected. The other really memorable ones are just kind of like they start to blur a little bit, but basically just meeting people inside of like meetup game contexts, or just outside of poker rooms, and really the people who say like I got back into poker more because of you. Those ones I love the most, because even though I want to provide value through like strategy and I want to provide entertainment and stuff, I think that providing excitement about the game is probably the highest value thing that I can do, both for those people but also like for the game of poker itself.
I agree, and people need that emotional spark. Poker, and I've spoken about this at length with like Elliot Rowe, but poker's an emotional game as much as it is a logical, rational game, and lots of people, most people, can have a bad taste in their mouth after playing cards for a specific period of time because who likes getting crushed all the time? Like who likes just always getting beat down? So providing that emotional encouragement, I think, is a huge service to the community. When you think of joy in your poker career, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Oh, I mean the first memory of like really big deal positive emotion is got to be final tabling the MSPT. That was in like 2015. I was still working a 9 to 5. I wasn't really, I mean, I was taking it seriously, but I wasn't, it wasn't my full time thing by any stretch.
What were you doing? What was your 9 to 5?
I was working in healthcare software. I worked for a company called Epic that did electronic medical records, and it was like one of the biggest employers in Madison, basically.
Okay, now that I've forgotten that, because that sounds like a very boring gig. I can see why. I can see why you chose poker. Um, so you're doing the medical thing, and what was the buy into this tournament?
It's an $1,100 sort of like regional event. It was a tour that, I mean, they still are very active. They're actually still growing, but mostly active in the Midwest. And so it was a series that I was driving around to all the local stops, basically. And I think this was probably only my third or fourth time playing it, but my first cash, and it was like a 600 person field, and
It's a lot of
it's like an
people.
$1,100 tournament. So of course I think I'm like the best player in the field at the time. I thought I was. And so I make it to the final table, and it was like streamed and everything, and it was just a very cool experience. And I think that a lot of people sometimes get in their heads or like too obsessed with the payout jumps or whatever. And I just remember being so happy to be there, just like extremely grateful to actually be still in the tournament and getting to play and being on stream and just enjoying myself. And it's hard to capture that again. Like, you don't really get that a lot of times in cash games, I think. I think there are some really positive like camaraderie type moments you can get in like home games and with some groups of regulars, but final tabling a tournament is pretty much the top of the bill for me.
Yeah, I think I've only made one live final table. I play almost no tournaments, always cash game, and there's a thrill. Of course, there's an adrenaline, especially when you make it down. This is what you're there for, right? And then
Yep.
the whole time you're thinking, at least I think like, okay, there's 400 people left. I have like a 1 in 400 chance of taking this down, and like every people just keep getting knocked out, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I can see the finish line.
Yep.
And it's the same for online tournaments, of which I have made a number of final tables there. But what was first place in this tournament? Do you remember? I mean, I know you remember. Come on.
Of course I remember. It was 150,000.
What were your thoughts about that 150K? Well, like what would you have done? Did you win it? I don't even know. This is my bad research coming out. I don't think you won it, but
I didn't win it. No. So yeah, again, I mean, like, I honestly don't think I was thinking about the payout jumps that much at the time, which frankly I probably should have been more from a strategic perspective. Like, there's got to be some ICM mistakes in there, but I have the stream still exists somewhere. I think on the MSPT poker website, like, they have all their old streams, and there was no commentary. Like, there was a technical difficulty, and so there's no commentary on it, but the stream exists. And I've actually watched it back, and I've like years later, and I thought like, I played pretty damn well. But
nice.
I wasn't really thinking about the 150,000. I think I honestly thought about that more after the fact. In the moment, I was just pretty much in the game. There were moments of probably thinking like, holy shit, I just locked up like 10 grand. Oh my God, I've got 15 grand now, 20 grand. Cause that was a huge amount of money to me at the time, right? Like, relatively speaking. But the 150, it was like so far out of reach still. It just didn't seem real. Like, $20,000 still felt like a real amount of money to me, but 150 was just like an impossible sum at the time. Like, I just couldn't.
How much were you making
visualize.
a year?
I mean, I was making pretty good money. I think I was making like 70 or 75K a year.
So 2 years of your life, if you take this down.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. So, yeah, but definitely after the fact, I thought about it because, whatever hands I lost that I got unlucky on, or that I could have played differently, it's like, obviously I had that some level of rumination. I think it's impossible to avoid that when you go so close. I ended up busting 5th place for like 33 grand, which was still like by far my biggest cash ever. And to this day is like still in my top 5 or top 4 or something like that. So, it's like, it was great. It was an amazing experience. I still look back on it fondly. I don't really think about like, what if I'd won it anymore, but I still remember the bust out hand because I got slow rolled like pretty damn badly. And I shouldn't even say slow rolled because it wasn't on purpose. So it's not really a slow roll. It's more of a net roll, whatever, technicalities. I ended up So I lost like queens all in pre to ace 10. And then I was very short. I got like one jam through and I probably had like 8 big blinds. I was on the button and jammed pocket sevens, just like uber slam dunk. I like kind of want to get called to, get back in it, whatever. The big blind starts tanking. I'm like, this is fucking fantastic. Excuse my language. It's like this old guy, but he was the most crazy player I've ever played with. I played like a number of hands with him when we were down to 2 tables. And so I'm like, if he's thinking about it, I'm just like in stellar shape here. Right? He's got like deuces. He's got like ace 5 suited. And he just finally sighs heavily and drops in the call, waits to see what I have, and then rolls over the pocket tens. That's just absolutely wrecked. And we don't get there somehow.
It's the one you needed. There's always, every tournament I've ever played, there's always the one you needed. It's always the last one.
You got to just win your last hand. That's what they tell me in the tournaments. But I've only done that once live and several times online. So
I am unsure. I've never won any. I would consider like a major win like 50K plus for a tournament. I've never been to 50K plus tournament. I've won 30K. I've won 15K. I've staked somebody who won a tournament for 70K. I don't know if that counts.
It's close.
So let's look at the opposite question now. When you think of pain in your poker career, what's the first memory that comes to mind?
Busting out of the main event the first year that I ever played it. Because the main events, I mean, I know it's like sort of silly to say another tournament moment, but like the main event's like a tournament that can't really be compared to anything else. I don't know if you've played it, but it's so hard to put to words, but everybody who's played it gets it. Because it's this one tournament that is like, first of all, it's like the perfect event, right? It's like got the 2-hour levels. It's a hugely recreational field. There's just a buzz to it and an excitement that doesn't exist in any other tournament anywhere. And so you're in it. You have all these chips, like you feel invincible. Your table draw is great. Like, I mean, you're not always, but usually your table draw is great. And, you're almost like, probably like a 70% chance to make day 2 if you're a solid winning player. So like you're most likely into day 2. And on a lot of other tournaments, you don't make day 2 unless you're like, 15% or whatever. So you get to day 2, you're like, holy shit, I made day 2 of this tournament. And this is the biggest deal tournament of the year. Right. So you have all these building emotions. And for someone who's never played a $10,000 tournament before that moment, this is my biggest entry ever. The most I've ever risked on myself of my own action. I think I had like 40% of my own action that year, which was a huge deal. I think the most I'd ever put down on a tournament before that was probably like $1,500 or something like that. And then, you're playing well, you're feeling good, and then things just start to crumble. And these expectations that you had become reality, which is you weren't anywhere close to winning the tournament. You weren't anywhere close to $50,000.
What was the expectation in your head?
Well, and I don't mean expectation like rationally. I thought I was going to win the main event on day 2, but from an emotional perspective, I think we dupe ourselves when we're playing well and when things are going our way, that things are just going to continue. And especially back then, I was much less well-rounded and I had a much worse understanding of like how quickly things could just turn to shit in a poker tournament. And so, like, I think it's no surprise that my biggest emotional moments in poker came both a couple or several years ago. Like, I haven't had those big highs or those huge lows as much as I've progressed as a player and as a person, because I just have a better understanding of the game, of how I personally fit into that game, and of like controlling my own emotionality, basically. And I don't mean controlling like suppressing, like, oh man, don't be excited about winning, but just in the sense that I'm more level no matter what happens. I'm still kind of a basket case, but like relatively speaking.
I mean, there's power in immersion and experience and getting the reps in, just in any venture that you take. When you move up stakes, you're playing 2-5, you move up to 5-10. then all of a sudden you're playing 2K pots all the time, whereas at 2.5 you were not. It's going to be scary. You're going to have an emotional reaction when you start losing some 2K, 3K, 4K pots. But over time, you get a little numb to it, and it's just normal. It's just part of the normal thing.
I will say that the biggest sort of emotional thing that I've had happen in poker that's not from like several years ago, that was pretty recent, was last year I won the Ignition 100K guaranteed for like 16 grand. And it wasn't so much that I'd won it as much as I won it on stream. And that was really crazy because like I just started streaming, several months prior, and I wasn't even really sure if I was going to keep doing it or how much I liked it. And so to have like that kind of performance and to see like the viewership numbers grow over the course of the tournament and then to win it on stream that's probably like still a top 3 emotional moment for me. But again, like part of that wasn't necessarily even poker so much as like the ego part of me that is like wanting to be viewed as whatever, as like a good player, as someone who's skilled and worth watching and worth an audience and stuff like that. Exactly. So, and again, I still think that those things will lessen over time too, but that's definitely one of the recent ones for me.
Well, you are a human being.
Yeah.
These are normal human wants and desires. What I was going to say is before, now that I remember my brain started working again, is it's always easy to convince ourselves that we're not running well, that we're playing well. Like, ask somebody that's on a heater and you hear the same statement over and over and over again. I'm not even getting that lucky. Like, I'm just playing super well. I'm not even running that good. Like, it's this weird, especially like for a poker tournament where you're really at risk most of the time and things go south at the drop of a hat. You can just think like, oh, I'm playing super duper well. When the reality is you've just ran well. You've avoided coolers, you've avoided bad spots, and you've held when you've needed to hold. So bearing that in mind, in such a limited sample size as any single tournament, most of my experiences are cash games where somebody's on a heater for like whatever, a month straight. But like a tournament, it's hard to keep a level head and to keep the ego in check and to say like, okay, like just make good decisions, just continue making good decisions. I'm not a god. I have no access to things that nobody else has access to. Like, just keep yourself in check and do the best that you can. But it's easier said than done. What is up, you future star of poker, you? Coach Brad here, and I just wanted to take a moment to let you know about PKC Poker. If you're sitting there wondering to yourself, why is Coach Brad promoting this PKC Poker app thing? Allow me a moment to explain my why. Battling in cash games has been my livelihood for the past 15 years. It's how I survive and put food on the table for my family, which makes it imperative that I either test out or seek qualified opinions on all of the poker platforms on the market. One juicy find can mean the difference between a meh year and an amazing family vacation in Hawaii kind of year. With that said, I have tried almost all of the major poker apps on the market to date, and despite the hype about amazingly juicy games, have come away from the experience unsatisfied. I was just never able to find success against seemingly weak competition, and in one specific case was getting outright destroyed by passive villains playing more than 50% of their hands. What on earth was going on, right? After many evenings sitting in the bathtub, wondering if I had lost it, I finally dug into the data and learned something that shouldn't have been too surprising to you. These dudes were colluding and super using their pants off. So I swore off those free money, decentralized devil apps and decided to go back to my more familiar streets of Ignition. It was then that I was contacted by a good friend of mine who turned out to be the vice president of worldwide operations at PKC. Him and I had a long, in-depth conversation about security, the ecosystem, and the future direction of PKC, and he managed to convince me to give it a shot. That shot turned into an incredible 6 months with an hourly rate that's about 5 times what it would have been playing on any other US platform. As it turns out, I didn't forget how to play. I just needed to be on a level playing field to return to my crushing ways. I have no doubt that you, my community, my audience is going to play online poker somewhere, and I want to be damn sure that you don't go through the pain and frustration I felt by messing around with any poker app besides PKC. This is why promoting PKC is a no-brainer for me. I love you, I love my community, and I want to put you in the best position to succeed at this game that we both love so much. So if you'd like to join me in the streets of PKC, simply head to enhanceyouredge.com/PKCpod and get your invite code to play. You must have an invite code to play, and you must be 21 years of age or older. One more time, that's enhanceyoredge.com/PKCpod to get your invite code. Best of luck, and now, on with the show. So, what's something that people who are beginning their poker journey, what do you think they don't spend enough time thinking about?
Wow, that's a huge question. Just lob up there for me, but
yeah, no segue, no lube. We're just boom, straight to it.
No, I mean, I think that most people who are either starting out in the game or take the game, play a lot, but maybe don't study or think through the game a lot, are just not really considering the whys of their action enough. All right, I they play a hand with somebody and then they review it after the fact, and it's they explain what they were doing, but a lot of times there's not a clear why. And I think a lot of times people have a surface level why to why they do something, but then if you probe further and just ask why again, it starts to fall apart, and there's actually not really a solid process there. So we like to, not to plug School of Cards too much, but we like to use kind of this 5 why method, where it's okay, let's say you're examining why you lost in a session or something. You're okay, well, why did I lose $2,000 at 2-5 yesterday? And it's well, I lost this huge hand where it was kind of a cooler, set over set or something. And it's okay, well, why? It's well, actually, I kind of thought I was beat, but maybe I was a little tired. I've been playing there for 10 hours. It's okay, why? It's well, I haven't really been getting that much sleep and whatever. That's kind of a more meta example that's outside of strategy, but I think it works inside of strategy too, where if you start really probing at the actual reasons for doing things, you can get a lot deeper into how poker actually works, and then figure out from there what your strengths and weaknesses are and how to build from there.
And is this your process for regularly improving your game? What does that look like?
It's changed a lot over time. I basically don't consume content anymore now. So I don't want to say my process should be anybody else's process, because it really depends on where you're at. But for me, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that's improved me as a player over time has been that self-reflection, where I'm examining hands I played or sessions I played, and just figuring out what I think are mistakes and why, and then trying to get down to the root cause of them. And today, what I do to work on my game is basically mostly strategy construction and thinking about adjusting to different players in my games.
What do you mean by strategy construction? Let's go more granular.
Sure. So when you sit down to play a poker game, you can either sit down with no plan, or you can sit down with some plan. And I would say that strategy construction for me comes down to having a plan. And that can be very high level. It can be, I'm going to play tight and I'm going to value bet well, and I'm not really going to bluff a lot because this lineup is too call happy or whatever.
And it's specifically based on the lineup you're playing against.
I have defaults, but yeah, I want to at least have a plan when I sit down in what I know to be a particular kind of lineup, or to have a plan for how to change my approach as the lineup develops, or as I know what the lineup is. But you can get as granular as here are the lines that I take on particular board textures with these parts of my ranges. Strategy construction can go as deep as you want it to go. And so for me, like over the last year or two, it's been all about really defining what my strategy is. Cause for a long time, I just kind of sat down and did whatever, and like it worked, but it like a lot of stuff didn't work. And so it's been kind of a process of refining, picking apart the things that aren't working and why, and finding more of the things that do work and doing them more.
Let's look at this in an example. So let's imagine that you're playing in a game like a week ago.
Okay.
Just at your most recent game. Like, what does the strategy construction look like for the latest game that you've played in?
Sure. So the last game that I played live was a meetup game, actually.
This is why you have the meetup games, so
Yeah.
you have a scouting report ahead of time.
Right. And so, like normally the meetup games are pretty loosey-goosey, I would say. There's a lot of splashing around.
Why? Why is that?
Well, I think there's more of like a home game atmosphere. Most of the people, I mean, almost everybody there watches my videos. And so they're kind of there to hang out just as much as they're there to try to win, I would say, and probably myself included. But basically, you just kind of find that it's a different atmosphere. And I think the atmosphere at the table live can have a strong bearing on how people actually approach the game, even if they are not planning to have that impact them, pretty much. But so knowing what I know about how meetup games tend to be, let's say my game plan roughly is to come in and play a somewhat tighter version of my general opening ranges, maybe a more aggressive 3-bet style, because I think people are going to respond poorly to that by calling too much and then playing a little bit fitter fold posts. And then ultimately from there, I'm just going to sit down and play. Now in practice, I sat down and it wasn't like that. So this game was probably one of like the tougher lineups, and we ran it as a 3-5 instead of as a 1-3. So that could have, had something to do with it. There was also, we actually had Dan Zach in the game, as seen on Live at the Bike. He just came out to hang out. And so he threw a little bit of a wrench in that, like depending on what seat he had been in, I might have had to change up what I was doing. He ended up being 3 seats to my left, so I didn't 3-bet as much. He ended up cold 4-betting me, like 3 hands into the day, something. And I couldn't do as much wide opening because I knew he would be 3-betting aggressively if I was just like way out of line. So I went basically for a tighter opening when he was in the blinds, wider opening when he had already folded pre-flop. A lot of my strategy stuff was actually based on him because I think he was the best player in the game by far, which I think should be obvious anyway at a 3-5 game.
You got to fight fire with fire, man. You just gotta. He starts 3-betting. We got to 4-bet. We got to just get in there. Just go to war.
So he did 3-bet me a number of times. I chose to call because he seemed to be 3-betting me out of the blinds primarily. So I was calling a lot in position, which might not have been the right adjustment against such a strong player, but I chose to do it because I wanted to. And this is what I mean about how like strategy construction can be impacted by a lot of things. Like in that moment, like when am I going to get a chance to play hands against such a high caliber player for so little money? And so I don't really mind taking some, maybe marginal spots and then just kind of learning from it to examine later. Now I did end up playing a 3-bet pot against him where I runnered a good old gutter with a pocket pair. So that was cool.
Congrats.
But yeah, I played it great.
Congrats. You got very lucky.
Yeah.
Well done.
But yeah, from there, like, for example, you can also have like strategy adjustments against an individual player or against the table at large. So it's like there was one player at the table who actually wasn't there like for the meetup game per se. He just kind of like ended up on the list and in the game and clearly didn't know who I was or anything. And so like I got to kind of do some stuff against him that...
Did you tell him? You sit him down?
No.
Don't you know who I am?
Right. Yeah, haven't you heard of me?
They recognize me in the grocery store, motherfucker.
Oh boy, yeah. I knew I was gonna regret that story. No, but so it was like there was some stuff that I knew I would never get credit for against other players in the table. Like I'm never check raise bluffing this river spot, but against this guy who I saw was like making weird kind of value bluff bets on the river whenever he like saw weakness, giant air quotes, on earlier streets. Like I just got to check raise bluff the river like twice against him in like a 3-hour period. That's just like never happening most of the time without making like a pretty big adjustment in that game.
And I like what you said earlier. It's like, even though you can construct a strategy pre-session, when you sit down on the table, like the game itself is an organism that changes based on position, based on who's on your left, who's on your right, who sits in the game, who comes in. So like your baseline strategy is almost always altered, no matter what it is. And so making those in-game adjustments, being flexible while you're at the table, is just absolutely necessary to survive and thrive playing cards. Um, if you could gift all poker players one book, whether it's related to poker or not, what book would that be and why?
Well, I maybe I wouldn't actually do this because it might destroy the poker economy as we know it. But I guess Fooled by Randomness, it's such a good book for breaking apart our biases and assumptions about, at least in the context of poker, like variance and what actually constitutes chance or patterns or things like this. Because I just see so much, and this isn't it's not just recreational players, it's not just people who are unstudied, it's also rampant in people who take the game pretty seriously, that they just don't really have an appreciation or deep understanding of randomness and chance and like what that actually looks like on paper. Because we're trying to look at this nebulous concept of the long run in poker, and there's just no getting there as a human, like mentally. I mean, you might get there in your lifetime maybe, but like mentally it's impossible because you're looking at your day, your session, maybe your week, maybe your month, and even all of those views are largely going to be marred by the emotions from how the shorter bits of those have gone.
All of your biases.
Yeah.
And it applies to GTO theory as well, and running all the solvers and all of these things. I'm a big randomness person. The book that I tell people all the time on the show is Rock Break Scissors, which is also just on randomness and human beings being like the worst random number generators that have ever been created. Like you can't give somebody a spot where they raise 31% of the time and call the other 69% of the time. They're just not going to do that. Like there's no way to do it as human beings, which in a way is very good because it means that human beings are predictable. Behavior, people fall into patterns all the time that they're unaware of. And like in my conversation with Matt Berkey, he just said in a live poker setting, like deductive reasoning conquers all. And it's just such a true statement. Like just use your deductive reasoning while you're playing cards, and don't try to implement these GTO strategies because number one, you're not going to be able to do it. And number two, it all relies on you being the person to input the information. And if you mess it up, then your result isn't even what you want it to be, right? And a lot of times like baseline strategies are great. Baseline strategies, they give you a place to be flexible. But if you just apply a baseline strategy to everyone who come in all different shapes and sizes, you're just going to get crushed. Like you're just going to get smashed at the poker table and you'll never know what hit you. And you think that you're doing the right thing and that everybody's getting super lucky, but no, it's you making poor decisions.
Yeah, I think I like one thing you said, especially like humans are predictable. And it's like, yeah, in most contexts, like that's really good. Like it's really good that I know how my girlfriend's going to respond when I, buy her flowers or when I'm a jerk. It's like it's good to kind of like know those things about people. And in so many contexts, like being a human being, like from an evolutionary perspective, is just not good for being a poker player. like you've come to learn that the berries that don't kill you are like over there, so you want to go over there, right? It's like, well, at the poker table, if you jam the turn with 70% of the equity and you lose the hand, it's like, well, you're being sort of conditioned to not jam the turn when you have 70% equity anymore, and like maybe you try to get a safe river, but like it might have been the right play. So there's like all this weird stuff where we have to like unlearn so many things before we can even like begin to learn them at the poker table, which I always found really weird.
This is why you have so many old men saying that Ace King is like a horrible hand. It's like
Right.
Anna Kournikova looks good but never wins, right? Am I right? But it's like we have a negativity bias that gives us feedback, and we remember the times that we lose where we flop top set and it doesn't end up working out. And just getting over that and just realizing that, like, at the end of the day, we have a decision and we do the best that we can to collect information to make the best possible decision that we can. And that's all we can do every single hand. So, the point is to get better at information collection, get better at dissecting that information, finding what is of value, what we need to collect. Half the time when I have a coaching session with my students or somebody gives me a hand history, the actual solution is not even important. What's important is the lack of information that they give me when trying to solve this problem. Like, what could you have looked for? What information could have been available that you missed? And human beings, like, we're just funny creatures in general. About the randomness, it's like if a dude raises and he's on my right? And I 3-bet him twice in a row. Do you think I'm going to have a weaker hand or a stronger hand when I 3-bet him the third time in a row?
Stronger, for sure.
Stronger. But his perception is, okay, I'm ready to go to war now. This dude is fucking with me, right? So then he decides to 4-bet and goes off like a rocket in a spot where I know that that's going to be his reaction. You can only push somebody down so many times. But because if human reactions are predictable, you can use this, you can implement this into your game. You just have to think about it the right way and not let your emotions get the best of you, because it's very, very, very easy for that to happen. Got a few more questions and we'll get you out of here, man. What's something that my audience would be surprised to learn you're horrible at?
I don't know if there's anything I'm horrible at that they'd be surprised to know. But I am not a dancer. And my girlfriend used to take swing dancing pretty seriously. And like East Coast and West Coast. And so like I've been several times with her to like beginner lessons and whatever. And I'm a pretty like athletic person as far as like in the distribution of all human beings goes. Like I have good hand-eye coordination, but I just like can't get into dance. I'm also very musical, but I just can't get into dance. Like I do not feel the bodily like urges to move in ways that are in time with the music. And so I don't even know if it's that I'm bad, but I like just almost refuse.
What's the feedback your girlfriend gives you about your dancing? What does she say?
So she says that I'm much better than most beginners, but that I just need to like get over myself basically, which is maybe true. But yeah, I don't know. It's like it's a special combination of like the social anxiety of being on display to other people combined with like a skill that I'm not really good at yet. And I just like when I hear music, like I want to make music. I don't want to like flail my body around.
By the way, I'm horrible at dancing too. This is probably no surprise for people listening. So horrible that I just refuse to do it and I won't do it. And again, I'm with you. Like I feel like my hand-eye coordination is way above average. I love playing all sports. I love just doing all the things, but dancing terrifies the living bejesus out of me. And I don't know why. Maybe we need to do like an Elliot Rose session to get to the root, our subconscious cause of being so terrified of
I'm
dancing.
pretty sure it originates in middle school.
What happened in middle school? No, leaving it that. We got to go. What happened in middle school?
Generically, not for me specifically.
No, I don't. There's too much truth in that statement to ignore it.
No, there was no like one defining moment, but like I actually went to camps where they had dances, and I like hated those because it was like you didn't know how you were supposed to dance. Like I've always been a rule follower, right? So if I don't know the rules of the dance, there's just no hope for me, right? And swing dancing is actually better in the sense that like there are largely a set number of like steps and moves that you can kind of learn as a beginner. So like I can hold my own, but I just feel very weird because it's like you're just shifting between all these moves that I don't want to like figure out what I'm going to do next. And then I'm going to probably trip over myself if I do something too complicated. And then like, you get way in your head. So I think like the whole middle school thing was just mostly the social anxiety part where it's like, okay, I'm this, some hormonal teenager and I don't want to look like an idiot in front of these girls probably. But no, nothing particularly traumatic happened to me in middle school.
So there's this connection between poker too, because live poker is a social activity that we do in front of people. Do you have this anxiety of doing something idiotic at the poker table? Have you felt that? How did you get over it?
Well, so there's this interesting correlation that I'm not going to be able to attribute to wherever it originates from, but there's a correlation between pressure and performance. And basically, if the higher level of skill you have at something, the better your performance will be with pressure. And the lower your skill, the worse your performance will be with pressure. And I think this is probably somewhere in between skill and perceived skill. So take that with a grain of salt. But basically, like if I'm worried that I might suck at something and then you put pressure on me, I'm going to suck. But if I think I'm pretty good and I am like actually pretty good, and then you add pressure.
So if I think I'm pretty good and I actually am, I like the caveat.
So I mean that's a whole nother podcast as far as poker goes. But yeah. So like for example, playing on a live stream for a big poker tournament, final table, like that pumps me up. I'm excited to go. I'm not nervous about doing something dumb. I'm excited about proving myself. And I think that maybe if I got super into dance somehow, if I got over the hump and I got to the point of being like competent, it would probably go the same way where I'm like, yeah, I'd probably enjoy competing.
Lord of the Dance.
Yeah, Matt Vaughan, Lord of the Dance. That's going to be my new nickname after this podcast.
We'll have episodes of you dancing in your vlog coming soon.
Yeah,
maybe
in 2 weeks.
You just need to allegedly 2 weeks. I think like there is a correlation between experimentation and not having this fear of looking at it like an idiot when playing poker. And I was very lucky early in my career to be friends with Vanessa Selbst. And I remember the very first WSOP final table that she made. It was streamed. We communicated on AOL Instant Messenger, if that dates me at all. But she's messaging me. She's like, "Hey, I'm at this final table. Like, watch the stream, blah blah blah." And she like 5-bet shoves deuce 5 suited. This is like her entry into the thing, and like you don't understand how proud of her I was for that. Like, just like. This is a person that like does not give a shit. She sees what needs to happen and she pulls the trigger 100%. And somebody like that, even though she went flamed out spectacularly in that tournament, they're going to have long-term success at poker because they're willing to put themselves out there and figure out what works and what doesn't work. And that's somebody that you can work with, like as a coach, as a player. The people that are not going to get there are the people that are too afraid to have a theory, put it in action, and then learn from it moving forward because they just never learn. They never grow as a poker player.
I think that ties back into content creation too, because in some ways, like especially vlogging, but all forms of content creation are really like putting yourself out there to be judged and criticized by the world. And knowing that you have something of value to offer isn't the whole thing. You got to also be willing to, pull the trigger and do it. And like you said, a lot of people getting started is the biggest hump because they want it to be perfect. They need it to be just so. And really like getting started is kind of always the catalyst. I think you get out there and you go from there.
It's an emotional game. You have to deal with people saying that you suck because there will be so many people that say that you suck and that, that like people, we have a negativity bias, right? Where we gravitate towards the negative comments. And so like pressing publish is tough. There's a book that I love by Stephen Pressfield do the work, and pressing publish, sending it off is like one of the highest forms of resistance that you can face. His first screenplay, I believe it was like Godzilla Returns or something like that. And like he put the review of it in the book. And it was like, it was something along the lines of, I hope Stephen Pressfield isn't the real name of the screenplay writer for his family's sake. Right?
Oh, no.
Like just totally,
Brutal.
totally brutal. Right. But like he kept writing, he kept on, he kept creating. And he's had obviously a very, very successful career. And like you just have to, that fear of pulling the trigger, that fear of publishing, that fear of reaching out to people for help, you just have to get over it. And like you are going to crash and burn some. That's part of the journey, but you just have to put yourself out there. And that's really how you get to any measure of success.
For sure.
Okay, let's fast forward. Got 2 more questions. 15 years in the future, what are your accomplishments going to be in the poker field?
Well, first of all, I'll say it's like completely impossible to know. Poker is like just advancing so rapidly. I would say there's a very non-zero chance I'm not even like in the game 15 years from now.
I disagree. I think like live poker progresses much, much slower than online poker.
Sure. And by the way, I don't mean to say like I'll be not in the game because I'm lost and forgotten, but more so that I'm on to other things. I shouldn't have said those back to back. But
yeah, you'll be like
basically
Dan Bilzerian. You'll be
I'll be Dan Bilzerian.
Too big for the game.
I'll be big timing everybody. Yeah. No, I mean like I think that the things that I would like to have on my poker resume in that amount of time would be definitely a WSOP bracelet. That's something I would really like to accomplish. But I also know that it might not happen. Like I'm not playing 70 tournaments every year, so it's just it might not come to be.
How many are you playing?
Well, this past year I think I played 30 or 35. And I was pretty happy with it because I felt like I had the right balance of playing, taking breaks, and still like enjoying myself.
Did we win?
Not this year. It was actually my first non-winning year in like 4 years at the WSOP. And it was the first year where I had just about all of myself. So that was fun.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. But that's the first year I really played like a somewhat full schedule. I think the year before I played like 20, and the year before that it was like 10. So yeah, but I think over the next few years I'll play a pretty similar amount, somewhere between 25 and 35, and hopefully we get there. But if not, that's okay. I would just love to still be around in the game and enjoying the game, honestly, in whatever capacity that means for me at the time. Like that sounds really like a cop-out answer. I guess it is, but
what about the vlog? Where do you want the vlog to be?
So I don't think the vlog will. First of all, I never had an end game. I definitely have. I'm definitely closer to understanding one now than I did when I started it, of course. But in 15 years, the vlog won't exist. There's just almost no way. In the capacity that it is right now, as far as like me putting out weekly content that is largely pretty similar, like formulaic of some combination of my life and like the most recent poker session. It's just like, first of all, the demand is unlikely to be there in 15 years. And I think the space will be so saturated with people so much better than me at both the game and also content creation that I am very unlikely to succeed in that space for that amount of time.
I disagree. I think there's first mover advantage. Like there's first mover advantage in all things. Like even Twitch streams. Some people can have like horrible Twitch streams, but like they were there on day one, so they get the traction.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too off track. Twitch is actually way worse for that than YouTube. Like Twitch has even more of the first mover because you only find content by viewer count, pretty much. At least on YouTube, like there's search functionality and they're actually like showing new videos by small channels to everybody potentially. But yeah, I'm with you. Like I have a leg up for sure on like people coming in now. I just think that a combination of like my interests and the saturation of that space and the poker economy itself, like all of that in 15 years is just so in flux that it's very unlikely that Matt Vaughan's poker vlog is going to like look even remotely the same at that point. Now, I don't mean to like tease anything out here, but my girlfriend and I are talking about getting a dog in the somewhat near future. So you might see a Matt Vaughn dog vlog.
You can tease as much as you want, sir. That's kind of the point of this show, is to tease things. We have dancing and dogs coming to the Matt Vaughn poker vlog, scooping everybody else. You heard it here first, guys.
Absolutely. Yep.
So where can everybody find you on the
Sure.
World Wide Web?
Sure. So number one space is just YouTube. You can search Matt Vaughn or Matt Vaughn Poker. You can spell it correct or incorrect. You'll probably find me. So YouTube. I do stream on Twitch, but I haven't been streaming super consistently. But if you want to check me out there, Matt Vaughn Poker. And then schoolofcards.com is where I do pretty much all of my like higher level strategy content with the training site and also personal coaching. You can reach out to me about coaching via like social media and stuff like that, but generally speaking, I prefer to work with people who are kind of going through a curriculum. It just kind of, I've found, helps as far as like keeping people on a path. And as long as you set them at the right place on the path, having that curriculum is super powerful because everybody knows where we're at, what the expectations are, and what the goals are for moving forward.
Got it. So you can reach out to Matt about coaching, but he's not going to coach you. So good luck doing that, guys. What can people expect? Maybe they're not familiar with your YouTube channel. Besides the 2-minute long shoe montages, the dancing, and the dogs, what's the value of your vlog?
Yeah, it's it's funny. Like I feel myself not wanting to answer that question because I I have a I mean, I think most people suffer from this, but I have a problem trying to say the things that I think I do well. But I'm going to try. I'm going to power through. What people have told me is one of the best qualities about my vlog is that I have a way of speaking about hands that is very accessible. And so, even though I may be thinking one thing in a hand that could be high level, or maybe it's not, maybe it's fuck this guy call. But maybe I'm thinking through a spot that's pretty high level, but I can distill it down to the points that are important and in a way that makes sense to most people, even people who don't have an extremely thorough background in studying the game, or understanding GTO, or even like are on a training site. And so I think that's why vlogs that have hand analysis are kind of cool, because you can see, like, first of all, a glimpse into that person's personality and their life, but also just into how they think about the game, which is probably going to be different than the next guy. And I think that's really the only reason that my channel exists, because I do think that an Andrew Neeme or a Brad Owen are light years ahead in many respects as far as their content, but at the end of the day, they're not Matt Vaughn. So
We're plugging your vlog, and you just go ahead and plug Andrew Neeme and Brad Owen. What is the?
Well, hey,
can they dance too?
You missed the cherry on top, which was, yeah, but they're not Matt Vaughn. So
nobody heard that. Yeah, well. Everybody was like, "Who's this Andrew Neeme? We're gonna go look him up." But no, you're right. Like speaking in a language that people understand is very beneficial, especially for people just entering the game. A lot of times, like the jargon, all of these things can be a little overwhelming.
Before we sign off, though, you just reminded me of one of my favorite negative comments of all time that I've ever received.
Go for it.
Because, by the way, when you're on YouTube, you will get many negative comments. You have to find the positive in the negative. I've been told, and by the way, this is not a unique comment. This is a comment I've received 2, maybe 3 times from different people. I have a very punchable face. So if you want to watch a guy with a very punchable face, maybe you need to put a hole through that old monitor, justify getting a new one. Feel free to check me out.
All right, let's end this. Let's end this dancing dog show. Very, very happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah, my pleasure. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you haven't yet subscribed to the show, please take a moment to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. And once again, I wanted to let you know about PKC Poker. If you're on the lookout for a new poker platform where the games are safe and secure and the action's amazing, head to enhanceyouredge.com/PKCpod to get your code and jump into the games. You must have a code to play, as well as be 21 years of age or older. One final time, that's enhanceyouredge.com/PKCpod. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on Chasing Poker Greatness.